Mom, Dad, you should shop Amazon for back to school and save some money. See, I'm currently obsessed with superheroes and need all the superhero stuff. Superhero lunchbox, superhero backpack. But next year, it'll be something else. Maybe dinosaurs? I don't know. I'm not a fortune teller. But I can tell you not to spend a fortune and shop low prices for school on Amazon. Okay, good chat. Amazon. Spend less, smile more.
At Blinds.com, it's not just about window treatments. It's about you, your style, your space, your way. Whether you DIY or want the pros to handle it all, you'll have the confidence of knowing it's done right. From free expert design help to our 100% satisfaction guarantee, everything we do is made to fit your life and your windows. Because at Blinds.com, the only thing we treat better than windows is you. Visit Blinds.com now for up to 40% off site-wide, plus a professional measure at no cost. Rules and restrictions apply.
Unfiltered discussions, unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello and welcome and happy Monday to those of you celebrating civic holiday. Happy civilization to you. Tonight you'll learn something, but we'll be stupider for it. And here's what we'll cover on the program. Ghosting. It's that silent breakup technique where you stop talking to the other person. Most of us have either done it or had it done to us, myself included. And you're often left wondering, agonizing, thinking, did I get rejected by this person? Or are they just a little too busy? Maybe the door's still open. Well, psychologists have finally studied ghosting. It's not just speculation. And in 10 minutes' time, we'll explore why it hurts so much and why it keeps us clinging to false hope. Spoiler, you shouldn't do it. It is a thing to do. After that, a study that shows you might trust someone with a higher-pitched voice to handle your money and not even realize you're doing it. We'll take a fascinating look how something as simple as a high-pitched hello can influence your financial decisions. That'll be halfway through the hour. That is merely some of what we'll cover on tonight's program. We'll tell you more about it as the night progresses. For now, let's jump in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
And in record-breaking news, for the longest grudge ever held over an eggplant sandwich, we go to Paterson, New Jersey, where a stabbing happened over an eggplant sandwich. We are joined by foreign correspondent Tony Five, reporting live from the scene of his apartment in London, England. Tony, welcome.
David, I take you to the mean streets of New Jersey. Last month, July 31st, my friend, there were some brothers who owned a bakery, and they make wonderful sandwiches. Apparently not very good eggplant sandwiches. Bad enough that a man would come back 4 years later and cause a problem and a fray.
So 4 years ago, he ordered the eggplant sandwich. He sits on that one. I imagine he doesn't leave his house. He's just getting angrier every day, day by day.
It made him sick. So do you reckon he just had diarrhea for 4 years?
For 4 years, that could kill you.
Yeah, that's probably why he got so angry though, right?
Probably. So, I mean, it's awful because people got stabbed. But I mean, over an eggplant sandwich, it boggles the mind.
Dude, they offered him a $3 refund and a hot dog. He said no. He stabbed one in the chest and slashed another brother in the arm.
My goodness.
and then he fled the scene, like without a sandwich. So he caused like a felony, nearly killed these guys, and then ran off, I'm presuming, to the nearest subway.
Is that an endorsement for their eggplant sandwiches, or could these be the worst eggplant sandwiches on the face of the earth?
When I was reading the article, I was trying to work out what an eggplant sandwich is. The eggplant is an aubergine, right? That's what we call it here in the UK, yes. Which is like a big purple thing.
Yeah.
That's an eggplant. But what an eggplant sandwich is just sliced those in a sandwich with bread and butter.
I think sometimes they fry them or serve them with like tomato sauce, as you would say. They're delicious is what they are.
Have you tried one? Have you had an eggplant sandwich?
Yeah. It's like eggplant parmesan. So probably like eggplant, tomato sauce, mozzarella cheese, melted. It's delicious.
I just think it's just the weirdest reason to like for an attempted murder. Can you imagine? I always say this to you, when these guys get caught and they're put in like federal penitentiary and they're like against hardened gangbangers and real, like back to the wall type criminals. What did you do? Well, I stabbed a guy over a sandwich 4 years ago. I just don't think they're going to get the rep that they want in prison.
I want to know what was going on with this guy's life in those 4 years.
Do you reckon he just had a bad stomachache? Like, how had he forgotten where he'd bought it from? Or had he had PTSD? He just walked past the sandwich shop and realized it was that place that had caused him too much trouble.
I don't know. And because he's fled the scene and cops are looking for him, we may never know unless they catch this hardened criminal.
Or in 4 years' time, he comes back again. It'll be 8 years since he had the eggplant sandwich. He does it every quarter.
Maybe the hot dog that they offered him as compensation, maybe that gave him a stomachache. So,
He just sent him over the edge. I do like that, yeah.
What a wild crime. Could you imagine getting bad food, sitting on it for 4 years, and then going back to complain? Not even stabbing, just complaining. That's insane. Stabbing over it takes it to the next level.
I've had bad food, but whether I would come back and complain, I'm awful. Are you the sort of person that can complain about food?
Yeah. You mean like send it back?
Yeah.
I mean, I try not to. Like if it's just mediocre, I'll eat it and not go back. But yeah, if it's like rotten or foul or there's like maggots in it, yeah, I'll send back food.
Oh, I mean like horrifically bad. Or let's just say, could you like order a steak? You've asked for it, I don't know, let's say rare, and it comes back medium rare. Are you that person?
Redoing a steak is annoying. So if it's overcooked, I'll usually eat it. But if it's undercooked, yeah, because that's so easy. They just throw it back in a pan and heat it up more. Like sending back an underdone steak is easy. Overdone, I'll usually just eat it.
Okay. What about I've asked for no tomatoes and they put tomatoes on your meal?
Why would you ask for no tomatoes?
Because I don't like tomatoes.
Well, you're weird, man. That's you.
So you wouldn't send it back? You wouldn't say, look, I asked for no.
Why are you ordering things with tomatoes if you don't like tomato? Like you're spaghetti and tomato sauce and hold the sauce?
No, the opposite. I've said no tomatoes, but they've put tomatoes in.
Can't you just pick them out?
Okay, see, that's what I mean. So you wouldn't send them back. You'd take it out yourself.
I would hold a grudge. Like I might not go back to the restaurant. And if a friend asked me about it, I'd say the service was lousy. But no, I probably wouldn't send it back.
I mean, again, what's the statute of limitations on tomato-based anger? Would you go back in 2 years and maybe hit one in the face?
Did you just ask me what the statitude was? Like the statute and the attitude towards all mixed into one new Tony word?
Correct. The statute of limitations. Do you like that?
Your brain is not working tonight, and I love it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm usually not one to complain. But I mean, I will hold the grudge, so I'm unlikely to go back.
Wow.
But in the moment, unless it's foul or egregious, I probably won't send it back, because then it's a whole thing. They take it off the bill. What's wrong with it? Oh, they check on. They start annoying you after you send something back.
It's a very passive-aggressive culinary attitude you have there, isn't it?
What do you mean? That I'll accept the bad food?
Yeah, you'll accept the bad, but just won't go back there again. So taking your business elsewhere is your way of like giving them what they get.
Well, if it's like an honest mistake, but like I typically don't modify dishes like a psychopath because I don't like things that everyone likes, like tomatoes.
Oh, I do. I have to modify everything. I think you know that. I am a fussy eater.
Because you're a fussy eater and you're making the restaurant accommodate you. And then when they don't, because you're fussy, you send it back?
Well, they've made a mistake. So why accommodate me? Why say, oh, well, have it your way? Like when I go to Burger King and I ask for an extra slice of bacon, but they don't put my extra slice of bacon in. Other burgers are available. Don't we have to say that?
Are we talking about Burger King or are we talking about a nice restaurant?
Both. Aren't they a nice restaurant?
I mean, if it's fast food, you just tell them and they just make you a new one. It's easy peasy, in and out 2 seconds. Yeah, I'll do that.
Oh, okay. But not like a fancy Michelin-starred restaurants that you frequent.
Yeah, if it's like a sit-down restaurant, but I typically don't order things. It's not like I'll have the steak, hold the steak, and bring lamb. Like, I don't do that,
Ask for a completely different animal. They just bring you something complete. That would be weird.
I'll have the Caesar salad, but hold the salad and bring the beluga caviar. Like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, just bring the emperor out. just him alone. Just bring Caesar out himself. Forget about everything else. Okay, fair enough. That's decent.
Anyway, this schmuck, this jerk, this stabby piece of you-know-what stabs someone over an eggplant sandwich 4 years later. It's a wild story that I love.
It's very, very sad. And I do hope the brothers make a full and frank recovery. Frank as in Frankenfurter. But I'm hoping that, they catch this guy. Guy sounds like an absolute psychopath.
Does sound like a maniac.
Yeah, I again, like I said, it's very sad. And the fact that they offered him a hot dog and $3. They tried.
You know what? If someone makes you a bad sandwich and you remember 4 years later and you walk into the store and they offer you a few dollars and a hot dog, that's actually a nice outcome.
That's a win because you're getting like another hot dog and maybe $3.
What rational store owner would respond to a complaint 4 years later about a food item? Most would say, get the heck out of here, you crazy person. But no, they went the extra distance. They said, we'll give you some money, maybe a refund, and we'll give you a hot dog. How does that sound?
David, I'm going to split it the other way. What if they knew they're intentionally making bad eggplant sandwiches and just have a stash of hot dogs and $3 under the counter?
That I can't speak to. But you know what I can speak to? Loving having you here, Tony Five, foreign correspondent. The offbeat news of the world would be nothing without you. Thank you for joining us live from the scene from your apartment in London, England. After the break, psychology researchers have cracked the code as to why ghosting, when someone disappears on you after a date, hurts so bad. I'm David Cooper. That up next on The Last Show.
In the 70s, 4 young women were found dead. For nearly 50 years, their cases went cold. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. In the season finale of Crime Beat, I share how investigators uncovered shocking evidence of a serial killer and hear exclusive interviews with the killer's family. Listen to the full season of Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music by asking Alexa to play the podcast Crime Beat.
When your therapist won't take your calls anymore, there's always The Last Show with David Cooper.
Ghosting. It's the silent breakup that leaves you wondering, agonizing, thinking, did I get rejected or is the other person just a little too busy? But there is psychology research into ghosting, and researchers have attempted in the lab to find out why it hurts so much and why we can't let go. I'm here with one of those researchers. Her name is Amanda Szczesniak. She's a social psychology researcher at Wayne State University in Detroit. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Why the curiosity into ghosting? I feel like this is something that gets talked about a lot in pop culture, but I don't know that there's been a ton of like academic psychology research into it. So why the curiosity in this area?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, ghosting is becoming a very popular conversation topic. People often describe it as a very distressing way to experience a breakup. And this inspired us to explore what makes this dissolution experience particularly impactful. And there has been previous research done on ghosting in the communications field, especially. But this research often looks at retrospective reports or participants recalling past experiences after they know that they've already been ghosted, looking back on the experience. So we were curious on how do we look at ghosting? How do people feel in the moment? And how is this unique from direct explicit rejection?
Having been ghosted, it feels like an emotional gut punch, but I am wondering, why does it hurt so bad? And why does it hurt so much more than a simple like, hey, thanks, no thanks, or hey, that was a great bunch of dates we went on, but I'm actually not interested? Like, is there something that goes on with our brains when we get ghosted that's a little different than when we get cleanly broken up with?
Yeah, so in our work, we did find that when people experience ghosting, they do have that continued emotional attachment to their ex-partner or the rejecter, which then might make it more difficult to move on. So we do see that those who are ghosted have this similar negative emotions or emotional pain compared to those who experience explicit rejection, but yet there's still that continued attachment, potentially because we might still feel like there is a relationship to restore there. So that might be one of the reasons why ghosting is particularly unique, in that there's that uncertainty and that continued attachment to the ex-partner.
It's sort of like that you feel, having been ghosted, like that door is slightly open. Like if I only had one more interaction with them, maybe they wouldn't reject me. Is it something like that?
Yes, for sure. So previous research has looked at ambiguous rejection broadly in social psychology. And we do see that for those who experience ambiguous rejection, which ghosting would fall under, they do often feel that there is a potential to restore their relational value or their relationship with that individual. So seeking, a gain of that relationship with that ex-partner. On the other hand, explicit rejection, there's more of a focus on, that those ties are severed. Now let's try to go find social connections with other individuals. So that might be one reason why ghosting, in particular, that ambiguity, kind of leaves that door open for, potentially restoring your relational value with that ex-partner, which is why we see, continued contact attempts and this emotional attachment continuing.
Interesting. How do we simulate this in the lab? Every situation I've heard of or experienced of ghosting seems different, highly personal, very much a product of that date that you went on with that one person in that moment that you matched on that app or whatever. But how do we simulate this in the lab? How do you study ghosting in a way where you can kind of make claims about it?
Yeah, for sure. So, as a social psychologist, we try to focus on the processes themselves. So, even though each experience might be different phenomenologically, we try to look at these underlying processes of what could be happening common throughout people. And so, to do this, we looked at ghosting experimentally in the lab. We had 2 studies in which participants initially joined the study. They were told they would be undergoing a hypothetical dating scenario, such as, an online dating site. And we gave them 4 profiles or options of people to date. Once they selected someone, they imagined asking this target to go on a date with them. They imagined the target accepting, and we provided visual aids to assist in this. So, for instance, text messages of the interaction. We allowed the participants to select where they wanted to go on a date, things like that to increase their immersion into the scenario. And then after that, they imagined inviting the target or that dating partner out on another date, and they were then randomly assigned to one of 3 conditions. So the ghosting condition would be they were shown a picture of the text message that they sent to the potential partner, and they were told that 12 hours had passed without hearing from that target. In response to their date invitation. So they were kind of left hanging. The explicit rejection condition, the target simply stated they weren't interested, and the acceptance condition, the target accepted the date. So that's kind of how we compared those experiences.
Do ghosters know that it's kind of a lousy way to end things, that you're not giving people closure, that it's kind of unkind to the person? Or are some of the reasons people ghost, they're just oblivious, they don't know better, they're too busy? Or is it really a mix there?
I would assume the former. There is some research done by another lab that does show that people who have been ghosted in the past are more likely to ghost someone in the future, which seems paradoxical, knowing, how negative and how bad it feels that someone's still willing to do that. And that is one avenue that I'm interested in exploring in the future, is looking at the motivational processes underlying, why do people ghost even though they know it doesn't feel good? Is it sort of a shift in these motivational priorities or these needs that, one is prioritized over another, so we tend to ghost even though we know it feels bad for the other person.
Not giving that person closure. I do. What's your hunch on that one? I know you haven't done the study, and I know sometimes researchers don't like to give an opinion, but what's your hunch on the reason people ghost when they know it's not a great thing to do?
Yeah, so there are potentially 2 reasons. So one is, we know from research on relationship dissolution and breakups that rejecting somebody feels bad for the rejector, because we know we're hurting the other person. So in one case, we might feel like ghosting is an easier way to let someone down, less direct, even though we know it doesn't feel good. We might assume it feels better than direct rejection when we're the one who's doing the rejecting. On the other hand, depending on how that rejector feels about that relationship, if they're kind of on the fence about it, or if they're not really sure they want to sever those ties, ghosting might be a way to distance someone or distance yourself from someone, without, fully severing those ties. So if you want to go back to that relationship in the future, that door might still be open. So there are a couple different motivations I'd like to explore there.
You studied ghosting in early stage dating. Do you think being ghosted after a long-term relationship, let's say a year or more, would have similar effects, or would it be exponentially worse?
I do think it would be worse. And I think the reason for that I speculate would be mostly our own expectations and social norms. So I think in the early stages of dating, ghosting is, even though we know it feels bad, it sort of isn't surprising. It happens so commonly. But for a longer relationship, I feel like there would be those expectations that your partner would give some, finality to that relationship, some reasons for why it's ending. And so I do think that violations of those norms would make it feel worse.
Are there things you would want people who are dating right now to know about ghosting so that they can't claim ignorance? Things that you would want people to know, whether they should do it or not, or if they're going to do it, what they should be aware of?
Yeah, I guess, probably just some of the findings from our study, and that, being ghosted does feel similarly in regards to negative emotion as being ghosted versus explicit rejection feels similarly bad. But also that, we do find those who are ghosted have these repeated contact attempts, this desire to kind of like monitor what their ex-partner's doing. And if, you are the rejecter and you want to sever those ties and you want that finality of the relationship, direct rejection is probably the best way to avoid having your ex-partner contact you and sort of severing that emotional attachment.
Amanda Szczesniak is a social psychology researcher at Wayne State University in Detroit. Amanda, thanks for talking to me today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Up next, whether you realize it or not, if someone has a high voice, you probably trust them more with your money. The reasons why in a moment.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. With school out, summer is the perfect time to teach our kids real-world money skills they'll use forever. Greenlight is a debit card and the #1 family finance and safety app used by millions of families, helping kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. Parents can send their kids money and track their spending and saving, while kids build money confidence and skills in fun ways. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/Spotify. That's greenlight.com/Spotify.
Exploring both interstellar and interpersonal space-time continuums. The Last Show with David Cooper.
Who do you trust with your money and why? It might come down to subtle cues that you didn't realize, like the pitch of someone's voice. New research reveals how higher-pitched voices can sway your financial decisions, even when your logic about who you trust with your cash says otherwise. Are we really that easily persuaded? Let's discuss with Dr. Jillian O'Connor, an assistant professor of psychology at the University of Houston downtown. Jillian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
At a very high level, why look into who we trust with our money and things like their voice, subtle cues? Why is this of interest to you?
Well, our voices really seem to have this strong but kind of ignored impact on how we see other people. So it can change whether we find someone who's, really attractive, if we think that they're a leader, if we think that they're, someone who knows what they're talking about. And so one of the things I'm really interested in terms of first impressions like that is trustworthiness, because that seems to guide a lot of our day-to-day interactions. If you're going to ask someone to watch your laptop while you run to the bathroom, or if you're, going to let someone babysit your kid, trust is a really important sort of glue for society. And one of the most sort of day-to-day interactions that we have are financial exchanges, right? So someone might ask to borrow money, we might be trying to get a loan, or someone might be asking us to round up our bill for charity. And so it's those interactions I'm interested to see, are we always sort of cold and logical, or does this other sort of subtle cue we don't often think about come into play and maybe boost us to give a little bit more, or maybe we sort of keep a little bit more money for ourselves in those scenarios?
We'd all like to think we're cold, logical, level-headed. We'd make the same decision every time when presented with the same facts. But in reality, that's rarely true. It seems that we would trust higher-pitched voices with our cash. Tell me how you found that out.
Yeah, so what I did is I had listeners come in and play this hypothetical game. So just to explain the game a little bit, if I had $10 and I decided to send some of this money to you, for example, let's say I sent all $10, it would get tripled and you would now have $30. Now, the key here, though, is you can decide if you want to sort of reward my trusting of you by, say, let's split the money 50-50, we each get $15. Or if you go, haha, I have $30 now, I'm going to keep it, you're out of luck. So that's the sort of decision we have participants do. So listeners, they listen to either higher voices or lower voices. And that's the only information they had while playing this game. And then they decided, will they trust this person with money? And if so, how much? And it turned out that they would send more money to the people with higher pitch voices. Now, a sort of trick here is we actually reversed the roles and said, okay, what if you're the person that has to decide how much money you're going to reward this trust with? And we did it for all different levels, is like $1, $10 and up. And the same thing actually happened. People returned more money to people with higher pitch voices. So it seems to benefit us in two different ways. One is that we think people with higher pitch voices are more trustworthy with money, so we'll send it to them. But on the other hand, we also reward them with more money ultimately.
Wow, this seems like a lot of benefit. As someone whose career is really embedded in my voice, I'm thinking of maybe trying to get it higher or something here. How fast does the bias kick in? Like, do I have to hear someone speak for hours before I make a subtle decision on pitch? Or can this bias kick in almost immediately, like the first utterance, the first syllable, the first word?
Yeah, it kicks in almost immediately. So we had speakers just say the word hello before they were playing the game. And that's less than a second. So we don't need a whole lot of information. We just need a really brief sort of sound clip to hear what someone, if they're sort of higher pitch or lower pitch, not necessarily a conscious decision, but it's something that can push us. In fact, when I was looking at the monetary difference, it seems to be about $1. So if we're going to trust someone with, a lower pitch voice, we'll send them around $3.50. But if it's someone with a higher pitch voice, we actually send them about $4.65. That doesn't sound like a lot, but that's just one interaction. Imagine doing that over and over and over again. You could end up actually with quite a benefit if you have a higher pitch voice, getting, like 50 cents to $1 more, depending on the interaction. So it's sort of the subtle cue we don't think we're aware of in any case, but it can definitely sort of push us to be sort of more open with our finances.
What subtle associations do people have, even though they think they don't have them, with high pitch and also maybe oppositely with low pitch voices?
Yeah, so I'll sort of speak about men and then women because it really goes in different directions. So men tend to benefit from a lower pitch voice in a lot of interactions. So they sound more attractive. We think they're more likely to be leaders. We think they're more dominant. But on the flip side of this, we are also way more cautious about them. So we think they're more likely to cheat on their romantic partner. We think they're less likely to invest in a romantic relationship.
Whoa.
And from this recent study, they also sound more likely to take financial risks, like gambling or playing the stock market. So we might think on some level, wait, if they're going to be risky with our money, maybe we shouldn't give it to them. Maybe we should give it to someone else with a higher pitch voice. Now, we see similar patterns with women, except for it's the higher pitch voice amongst women that's seen as more attractive. Lower pitches actually sounds as more trustworthy, just overall. And then higher pitch, again, is seen as more financially trustworthy. So there's sort of like not one good voice to have. It really depends on the social situation that you're in. You can't say low voices are always going to win or high voices are always going to win. So if it's about maybe initial attraction, maybe it's sort of low male and high female. If it's about, finances or trustworthiness, it might be somewhat different.
Are there any truth to these biases, or are they just biases that we have? I'm curious, if I have a lower voice, am I more likely to be the way that people perceive me to be when handling money?
Well, we don't have any evidence to suggest that there's a true link that you could predict someone's financial behavior from their voice. It's really just what we think about people. However, when we look at other associations, men with lower pitch voices actually do report cheating on their romantic partners more than men with higher pitch voices.
Oh, no.
So, the perceptions that we're building, they are rooted somewhat in reality, but we're not quite sure how accurate that is for money just yet.
And on an individual level, we're greater than the sum of like what people bias us to be. But that is really interesting. Are there major takeaways that you would have people know now that this research is out? Like, okay, I've got a phone call with the bank. Maybe I should try to check my own biases here. Or any major takeaways from the study you would want people to know?
Yeah, I think the really important message here is just to sort of do a gut check and say, am I being swayed by some sort of superficial cue, like their voice, or even other things like how they're dressed or how they look, versus cold, hard facts? Because if we can push against those biases, maybe we can actually have more positive, sort of outcomes and more positive income. But I wouldn't suggest people try and fake their voice, because that seems to have some negative outcomes down the road too.
Oh, really? Why people think you're a phony baloney if you fake your voice or what?
Exactly. And it doesn't seem to necessarily make us sound more attractive or more dominant. It seems to be that our normal speaking voice is just about right.
I'm reminded of that CEO Elizabeth Holmes who had that seemingly artificially low voice. You know, there are people out there with these voices that it seems so obvious that they've changed them, and we have a completely different reaction than we'd have if that seemed to be their natural voice, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the thing is, those sorts of examples really suggest how powerful the voice can be in day-to-day life.
Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing your research with me. I appreciate your time, Jillian. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Jillian O'Connor is an assistant professor of psychology at the University of Houston downtown. You may read reports and hear reports, and I've been guilty of putting out stuff like this myself, saying that Gen Z has no workplace etiquette, that the young generation simply cannot function in the office. Maybe it's due to the pandemic, but is that really true, or are we recycling tired complaints that sound something like this? Kids these days. In a few moments, we'll cut through the generational finger pointing to find out if Gen Z is really as clueless as many headlines might claim.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Your above-average intelligence brought you here. It deserves above-average absurdity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Gen Z is entering the workplace more than ever right now, but did they miss out on soft skills because they were socialized during the pandemic? Or is all the critique of Gen Z at the office just sensationalizing a problem we had when our generation entered the workplace? A problem everyone has. They're beginner employees. I'm here to discuss this with Matthew Alston, a reporter at Business Insider. Matthew, welcome back to the show.
How you doing, David?
Look, we sent you an article entitled Soft Skills, Etiquette, and Gen Z. And I wanted to discuss this with you because I've been guilty of covering how Gen Z's workplace habits are a little off. But I do wonder, did millennials have the same problem when they entered the workforce? Did Gen X have the same problem? Did baby boomers have the same problem? And are we just regurgitating the same talking points? That's what I want to discuss with you.
It's possible. You're on the right track with this line of thinking because while generations are a useful tool for historians and for sort of like categorizing people by the experiences they had, this generation grew up during Vietnam, this generation did not grow up with the internet, and so on. You have to be careful of doing some sort of astrology, some generational astrology.
Kids these days.
Millennials have to stop buying avocado toast or they'll never be able to buy a house. And you can go, there's a viral Twitter or X, I suppose, thread from, a year or two ago where this cool sociologist did a history of nobody wants to work anymore. You can just go back 100 years and find, the bosses saying nobody wants to work anymore. This generation just sits with their hands in their pockets and, pre-phones, whatever they did, looked at the wallpaper like Barton Fink or something. But
or New Yorker comics. They just want to sit at their desks and look at comics.
Precisely. And even there was a big open letter 3 or 4 years ago from a bunch of sociologists to Pew asking them to stop using generations as a category always, all the time, because it is reductive, and a 20-year band of people isn't going to be like a useful set of data for a company of 200 people trying to figure out why this guy doesn't respond to emails. It's just not always the answer.
But there are some habits of Gen Z in the workforce that I think are a little different because, I don't know, they were tucked away inside during the pandemic for like 1 to 4 years, depending on where you lived. And those are like critical years where, you know, socialization at college, socialization at university, high school were kind of lost. And now they're in the workplace and they have different habits and the older generation notices them. And I feel like there's some truth to that.
While there's truth to that, I still will push back and say I don't see any surveys about how Gen X are bad at managing new employees, right? You can find these surveys and say, here was 68% of managers say supervising Gen Z often feels like parenting, 54% compare it to babysitting. Those are emotional data points and anecdotal data points as much as they are, useful measures of production. And while I do agree, it's separate from the generational conversation, it's worth saying, the 5 and 10 years of people who were in high school, college, or entered the workforce during COVID do have dramatically different workplace experiences. Again, how much of that is incumbent on management and corporate entities to help adjust the workplace to a workforce that has been socialized differently? It's not a Gen Z person's fault that they were socialized differently. And I try to push back on surveys and sets of data that say this group of people aren't good at work. Like everyone is good or bad at everyone is going to be as good or bad as the situation they're in, I think, typically.
So how would you imagine you're in a workplace, you're, I don't know, in your 40s, you're managing a bunch of kids in their early 20s who are just entry-level employees. How would you approach that situation?
Yeah, get off your phone.
Like, what are the tips for interacting with young people who grew up on smartphones with fast internet, who just, everything on Google's available. Every song exists for you to just play. I don't know. I didn't grow up with the internet like that. And I feel like the habits are a little different. Add large language models to the mix. I don't even want to get into that.
We'll talk about that next time. But
I just mean work habits are different.
They are different. Again, my stance is, as I've already stated, is bosses be better too. Bosses have to be better. But that is, I think it's maybe useful to consider that dexterity and utility and even just as much as trends accelerate and decelerate and vanish and pop back up in culture at an accelerated pace now, it's worth saying if I have a 24-year-old person on my team, they're going to be more useful at interacting with that digital world where they are on their phones and that sort of contemporary or modern world. You have to take the bad with the good a little bit, and you have to say, well, what are if they're lacking the ability to be formal in business writing or some sort of made up thing that Gen Z is quote bad at, what's Gen Z going to be good at? It's sort of think about the large language models. If Gen Z are terrible at separating the wheat from the chaff when it comes to asking ChatGPT every question instead of Google and not knowing how to find an accurate answer until the models catch up with reality, that's a training problem. But if Gen Z are just fast at communicating, that's something you can take advantage of. It's a tricky question.
There's also, as a manager of young people, there's something to be said for meeting people at where they're at, like their work style, their communication style. If you think someone is generationally different to you, like they're more likely to send an instant message than have an in-person conversation, you as a manager, you as an older person working with younger folks, should adapt to that and not just complain about it and shake your fist saying the kids these days kind of thing.
a smart manager I had at a job told me that if you're having trouble communicating, one of the first things you can do to try to resolve it is to just change where and how you're communicating. If you're in an argument or if you're just having trouble getting something out of someone and they're not responding to your emails, call them. And then maybe don't call someone. Maybe never call someone. But, switch to chat or switch to Slack or switch to, whatever it is. There's always the idea that you should meet someone where they are, irrespective of whether they're superior to you or beneath you in the hierarchy or whatever. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. And I do wonder if some of this criticism is just coming from people feeling old. I'm about to turn 40. Well, I guess in 9 months now. I guess not about, but it's right there. And I do feel when I'm around kids who are like 18 to 25, a real generational step away from them. I know using the phrase generations you kind of picked apart earlier, but I'm just using it for the purposes of this.
No, it's.
But yeah, that feeling of, I'm not the same as you, and is tough on people, and I feel like they take it out on younger people, and we shouldn't.
Those labels, I think, are as useful as you are generous with them, right? If you say Gen Z doesn't want to X, Y, and Z because they're Gen Z, you're probably not on the right track. And if you're saying Gen Z can't X, Y, or Z because they went to their last 2 years of high school during COVID, then maybe coming from a generous place, you're more likely to, quote, upskill them or give them the sort of path to whatever corporate success or work success looks like. Is kind of where I'm landing.
Well, Matt, I've enjoyed the chat because I've been guilty of interviewing people on the premise that Gen Z in the workplace, there's something wrong there. And as I've done it in the past, I've sort of thought maybe this isn't the whole story. So I've appreciated the chat. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yes, sir. Talk to you soon.
Matthew Alston is a reporter with Business Insider. Coming up next, is wanting a romantic relationship the key to finding one? Or could that desire be exactly what's getting in your way? Well, a new study breaks down the surprising psychology behind why some people find love and others don't. Turns out, it's not just about wanting it enough. If it's not for the right reasons, a serious girlfriend or boyfriend is less likely to happen.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Are you ready to dairy-free your mind? This summer, melt away your dairy-free expectations with So Delicious dairy-free frozen desserts. Enjoy mind-blowing flavors like salted caramel cluster, chocolate cookies and cream, cookie dough, and more. For over 35 years, So Delicious has been cranking up the flavor with show-stopping products that are 100% dairy-free, certified vegan by Vegan Action, and are so unbelievably creamy, your taste buds will do a double take. Dairy-free your mind. Visit SoDeliciousDairyFree.com.
We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The last show with David Cooper.
Why do some people find love while others spin their wheels? Well, new research suggests that the answer might lie in why you're looking in the first place. Let's learn what your dating motivation says about your dating future and why wanting to find that special someone too badly may actually backfire. I'm here with someone who studied this area. His name is Dr. Geoff MacDonald, and he is a psychology professor at the University of Toronto. Geoff, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start big here. Your research. Why look into why people seek romantic relationships?
Yeah, I mean, it started out, kind of like nerdy inside baseball, right? Where I've done a lot of research on romantic relationships, and the people who think about that, when you ask why are people wanting to have relationships, people think of it as we've evolved to want love or we've evolved to want sex. It's just some kind of natural drive that we have. But I've also been doing a lot of work on singlehood, and a lot of people who, think a lot about singlehood. If you've ever gone home for Thanksgiving as a single person, you know that there's more to, the motivation to get in a relationship than just what you want. Family, friends, society will sometimes get on your case if you're a single person, right? And so what I wanted to do is to do some kind of research where we could look at all of these different reasons why someone might want to be in a relationship at the same time and maybe learn something about how they affect people and whether they predict who's actually going to get in a relationship or not.
You know, as you listed your reasons for the why, I thought to myself, I have a Jewish mother, and the why is for like family reasons. She wants me to bring home someone so she can have grandkids. I feel like there are a lot of motivations that people look for that significant other that aren't just like, oh, I really want to be in a relationship for me, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly why we did it.
You developed something called the Autonomous Motivation for Romantic Pursuit Scale. For the uninitiated, what is this? And how does it help us understand what we couldn't see about relationships before?
So, yeah, I mean, it's the scale that I did to try to bring together all these reasons. And, you know, basically the idea is that there's a range of sort of autonomy that people bring to the things that they do. So probably the sort of best reason you can have for doing something is that you just enjoy it. So like, you know, if you're one of the lucky people, for example, who just enjoys exercising, it's easy for you to keep fit because you're not doing it for any kind of reward. You'll just do it for its own sake. And so on the scale, we kind of use that to apply to dating and getting in relationships. And so, you know, we asked as part of the scale, you know, do you want to get in a relationship because you enjoy it? But then we kind of like went down the range of these different reasons. You know, kind of a slightly less autonomous reason to do things is because it's an important goal for you. So, you know, if you're somebody for whom relationships are an important goal because like you want to have kids, for example, you know, you're not necessarily dating because the dating itself is super enjoyable, but there's a really important part of you that's going to get fulfilled by, you know, going out and meeting someone and building a family and that kind of thing. But then, you know, there's other reasons why people go out to date. You know, one is to feel better about themselves. Maybe you feel like you're a bit of a loser because you're single and you'd like to take care of that by getting in a relationship. That's less autonomous by our scale. You know, your mom giving you a hard time is what we call external motivation, where you're doing it to make other people happy. And then, you know, one of the biggest, most important parts of this, why I really like the model that we were using for this, is that it also includes a motivation, which is I don't want to be in a relationship at all. And again, there's a lot of people who don't want a relationship, and I think they've kind of been ignored, but their desire to not be in a relationship is part of what's in the mix in all of this too.
Interesting. Let's talk about those less autonomous motivations, like people who pursue relationships to maybe avoid family shame or because they're lonely and it's more about them feeling less lonely. Do these kind of motivations backfire and lead to people less likely to find fulfilling relationships?
Yeah, I mean, especially the one that, you know, if you're dating in order to not feel bad about yourself, you know, our research suggested you're actually less likely to end up in a relationship later. And this is consistent with some other research that, like, you know, people who want to be in a relationship to feel less bad about themselves, they're actually very strongly motivated to be in a relationship. They want it very badly. You know, there's some research about like what they're like on a first date, and they're extra charming and they're, you know, extra friendly, but people can also tell they're a little tense about the whole situation. And see, that's the thing, is that the people who have that kind of motivation, what the research is suggesting is they kind of get in their own way a little bit by not being chill, by like trying a little bit too hard. And also they tend to be the people, because this means so much to their ego, they take any kind of rejection super personally. And so it kind of gets in their own way. And that's why we think they're less likely to actually end up in a relationship.
If we want something so badly, it can have the opposite effect. Like even outside of romantic relationships, if you want a group of friends to like you a lot and you try too hard, it's off-putting to people. What is it about the human condition where if we want something really badly, people aren't willing to give it to us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that piece where it comes with this hypersensitivity to everything. So, you know, one of the things that we really like in our friends and our romantic partners is people who aren't super controlling. And, you know, imagine you're one of these types of people who wants this relationship so badly. You know, you tend to hold on to things tightly that you need desperately. And let's say like in a romantic relationship situation, what that often turns into is like being jealous and being controlling. You know, that can happen with friendships too. We're like, oh, why did you hang out with them? Why didn't you hang out with me? And that's a bit of a buzzkill when it comes to relationships. And so it's helpful if you want to have good connections with people to be okay with, you know, feeling that you're not their number one priority all the time. That gives the other people a sense of autonomy and makes you someone that they want to spend time with.
There's this pop psychology cliche that you have to love yourself, like spending time alone, learn to like yourself before you can love someone else. Which is to say, if you figure out how to be happy alone, you'll find someone more easily. But based on your research, is there actually truth to this cliche?
I think that is true. The people who, for example, we do a lot of research on the fear of being single, for example. And so, people who are okay with the idea that they're going to end up alone are the people who kind of have the confidence to go and put themselves out there more. So we do think that there's a bit of being, let me put it this way. I would say that the healthiest profile that we've been finding in our research in terms of people orienting themselves towards getting in a relationship is the people who would like to find somebody, but they're okay if they don't. And one of the things that lets people do is you can kind of be appropriately choosy. You don't just have to grab onto anyone, even if that's going to end up being a bad relationship. And in colloquial terms, people can smell desperation and it's not attractive,
Let's talk about those people who are okay being alone. Did you find that people who were alone were sexually satisfied more than you thought that you would?
Yeah, well, this was a bit of a surprise in the research for us. So, in these amotivated people, the people who were telling us that they don't want a romantic relationship, it was looking like there were two different types of people who are saying that they don't want a relationship. So one type of person is somebody who just doesn't have a lot of interest in romantic relationships. So think, for example, aromantic people who are pretty happy being single, not really that oriented towards dating. But it looked like there was another group of people who were telling us that they weren't interested in being in a romantic relationship. And we think that this is because they were having sex with people, they were maybe casually dating. And so what they were saying is that I don't want to be in a committed relationship, because these people did tell us that they were pretty high in sexual satisfaction. So we assume that a lot of them are sleeping with other people. But in a couple of our studies now, what we find is that these more sexually satisfied singles, they'll say, I'm not that interested in being in a romantic relationship. But if you track them over time, they're actually more likely to end up in a romantic relationship. And so, what we think is going on there is basically just the old-fashioned people catch feeling that when you get into what you think is a casual sexual relationship with somebody, people are like, I can just have a fling with this person and I'll break up with them and it'll be no big deal. But breaking up with a person is not the same as like bringing a TV back to the store, right? Like, you're hurting somebody, your heart starts to get involved in it. And so we found that these people who said that they didn't want a relationship was one of our groups who were more likely to end up in a relationship.
So it sounds like the key takeaway is that just figuring out how to do things alone, be happy alone, and date because you enjoy it. And that's the key to success. Well, Dr. Geoff MacDonald is a psychology professor at the University of Toronto. Geoff, thanks for going over your research with me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Up next, the science behind being allergic to your romantic partner's fluids. This is no joke and fascinating and weird. I'm David Cooper. The Last Show continues after the break.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Please be advised that the following program contains audio content that may be graphic and potentially triggering for some listeners. This content may include descriptions or sounds that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Tonight we're going to dive into one of the more strange and maybe steamy corners of medical science. People who are literally allergic to their romantic partners. We're going to chat about things like, well, I'm just going to say it, semen allergies and perhaps mysterious body odor reactions. Intimacy can get funky when it meets immunology. I'm here with Professor of Medicine at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine who's researched this. His name is Dr. Jonathan Bernstein. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
How are you? Thanks for having me.
I am well, and I'm excited to jump in. I actually know someone who has this, so it doesn't surprise me so much, but I'm sure a lot of people would be surprised to hear that people can have semen allergies. Is this different from other allergies like pollen or peanuts or shrimp or shellfish, anything like that?
But mechanistically, no. I mean, depending on the type of semen allergy, there's the type that does where people do produce allergic antibodies called IgE. That stands for immunoglobulin E, and those are made in specific response to a protein. So if you had a tree pollen allergy, you're developing these antibodies to the tree pollen. In this case, patients are developing these antibodies to proteins in the seminal fluid. Not to the spermatozoa, which is what's fertilizing the egg. It's to the actual fluid that kind of supports the spermatozoa. So when we look at these patients, we remove the spermatozoa to measure the antibodies in the seminal fluid. So these women who, if they have a systemic form of this condition where they have hives and wheezing and all kinds of symptoms, maybe gastrointestinal symptoms. And in the worst extent, their blood pressure drops and they can have what we call anaphylaxis. Those are patients who make an allergic antibody, like you said, to other allergens, whether it's a food or a pollen and so forth.
So in some cases, this is no simple rash. This can be like EpiPen, hospital, serious allergic reaction.
That's correct.
One thing that happens during sex, I don't mean to be a sex educator here, is when someone creates semen at the end during orgasm, that's not the only time that these fluids get released. They get released all throughout sex. And so this can really have a debilitating effect on someone's ability to have sex, can it?
It can be. It has a significant impact on people's interpersonal relationships. And certainly once they can figure this out, they can don a condom before they even begin intercourse, begin introitus. But that can be a problem if individuals don't like that, or they want to have children, they're trying to conceive. So there's a lot of unintended consequences. And a number of these women also have what we call localized seminal plasma hypersensitivity, where it's not an IgE, allergic antibody mediated condition, but it's due to other pathways that are not as well defined, but they have severe localized pain, burning after contact with their partner's seminal fluid. That's a different mechanism, but it's nonetheless something that if they use a condom, that can be prevented. And there are other treatment options.
Now, could it be that one individual is allergic to only another, or could you be allergic to all men's semen? Or it's kind of sad that if you are allergic to only a certain type of partner and then it just so happens that's the partner you're with, it can have a detrimental effect on the relationship.
That's a good question. And we did ask that in questionnaire surveys. And many of these women are not very promiscuous. They don't have a lot of sexual partners, so it's not always known. But we've had situations where they've said they've had it with other partners, but others who said, no, I never had trouble with other. Now, that could mean that they were sensitized with their first partner, and then they developed the antibody, and then with their second partner, they had the reaction. So every time you have an IgE-mediated reaction, you have to have exposure where the body becomes sensitized. You make the antibodies, and then upon re-exposure, that's when the reactions occur. So, and there's a latency period between that time of first exposure and the development of allergic antibodies, and then the next exposure where you have the symptoms. So it's still unclear.
Moving away from semen, could it be that people are allergic to each other's scent? I was reading a little bit about this too, like certain, body odors could cause an allergic reaction?
Well, it's an interesting question. Typically, we know that for seminal fluid allergy, it's the prostate-specific antigen, PSA, which is a marker for prostate cancer, but it's not related to cancer. This is the protein that women are sensitized to for the most part. So it is a well-defined protein that is causing this reaction. Now, with respect to body odor, that's a different question, and that's not likely an allergic reaction. And there could be other reasons depending on the types of reactions the women have. Whether it's a contact dermatitis, some respiratory symptoms. So I could give you an explanation for that, but I think it's probably beyond the scope of this discussion.
What are some of the ways in which like a bad response to someone's scent can happen?
Well, there are receptors in the body called TRP receptors, and these are calcium ion channels, and they're stimulated by mechanical, osmotic, and chemical stimuli. So chemicals and the body odors can actually activate these receptors and innervate the parasympathetic nervous system as well as other nociceptive nerve fibers that can cause depolarization, release of neuropeptides that could activate mast cells and cause these types of symptoms that you see with seminal fluid hypersensitivity. So it's a neurogenic response.
I'd like to say I understood every word you just said. So
well, I warned you.
You did. Back on the thread of talking about semen allergies, we do a lot of comedic work on the show, and it's a fun topic, but I feel like this is something to speak about because it's debilitating, because it can affect like somebody's ability to have a family, enjoy their romantic relationship with their partner, but also I feel like they aren't going to get a lot of pity. You speak up about this ailment, and you get made fun of because it seems silly, and that's kind of sad to me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conditions where people don't understand it. It's and if you don't have the right doctor who listens to the patient and really tries to understand what's going on, these patients will feel a little bit lost, and they do a lot of their own investigative research. And a lot of times patients are more astute about diagnosing or self-diagnosing than their physician. So it's important that we do create awareness in the medical community, and that in medicine, nothing is impossible. And there's always, every time people poo-poo things, that's when things can happen. So I've been around long enough to know that there's a lot of unusual things that are not readily explained in a textbook, but that there are reasons for why it's occurring. And we're learning more and more about alternative pathways, as I explained with the odors, and other processes. But this is a real condition. Fortunately, probably not very common, but it does occur. The localized form is probably more common. Well, two women have the severe pain and burning, and that is also treatable. Both conditions can be treated with desensitization to semaglutide.
And those symptoms, descriptions like it feeling like acid, like 1,000 needles, just from being intimate with your partner. It's perplexing and maybe upsetting for those experiencing it. Do you think this has gone underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed because physicians don't know about it, or people aren't willing to speak up about what they're experiencing?
I think it's a combination. I think it's something that it's not recognized, but it's probably not overly common, but it does occur with probably some consistency.
Well, Dr. Jonathan Bernstein is a partner at Advanced Allergy Services at Cincinnati. He's a professor of medicine at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. Jonathan, thanks for talking to me today. This was an interesting chat.
Thank you very much. I hope it was useful.
Up next, you've heard the outrage, a CEO caught kissing an employee at a concert. But here's the twist. Most of us are doing it at work too. Coming up after the break, believe it or not, workplace hookups seem to be everywhere. So why can't HR departments keep up?
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Broadcasting from the neutral zone, where every perspective gets diplomatic immunity. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
An awkward kiss cam moment between a CEO and his employee went viral, but is this really a shock? I am with two reporters at Business Insider who say nearly everyone is hooking up at work, from innocent office crushes to full-blown affairs captured at Coldplay concerts. We explore why the office is more steamy than you'd think and what HR should do about it. That is, if HR can keep it together. I'm here with Mia de Graaf. Mia, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
And Julia Pugachevsky. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, is this just a salacious headline, or is everyone hooking up at work? Am I meant to take that literally?
A lot of people are hooking up at work. There's a good amount of research that shows that like maybe 1 in 10 people find their partner at work. And then there's a survey that found that 60% of people have hooked up with someone at work. So it's pretty significant.
Is it sort of like Fight Club? The first rule is we just don't talk about it. Like, were you surprised when you found out just how common it is?
Well, look, I met my husband at work, so but that's extremely common, as I'm finding, because you're in a situation where you might, where you might meet someone because of a like-minded situation. I mean, Julia, you spoke to a therapist about exactly why we're wired to do that.
Yeah, I think it also, I would say, depends on the age a little bit. I think with the kiss cam, them both being kind of older and high-powered positions, the therapist that I spoke to was saying that that's even more common sometimes because at that age, let's say in your 40s or your 50s, I don't know how old they are, but, you're more likely to just have more responsibilities in life or maybe more stress, more pressure. You might be trying to figure yourself out. That work might present opportunities to connect with someone in kind of a new way. So that's another sort of element to this whole story.
Yeah, you've got the family, you've got the kids, you're a high-powered executive. The only time you're going to get free time is like with your coworkers in most cases.
Right.
We've got HR departments, we've got sexual harassment training, we've got Slack surveillance. It seems like corporations are really trying to prevent this, and yet people are still making out in the copy room. Why? Why are corporations so against it, and why do you think it happens so frequently anyway?
Well, I feel like the reason it happens so frequently is just because of human nature. There's like a few different sort of like psychological effects. One of them is called the mere exposure effect, which is literally just being around someone. You're just going to get to know them more. You'll build a fuller sense of who they are and maybe just see them in a new light. So, sometimes it's literally a convenience relationship. You're like, oh, wow, I see this person a lot. And then you're more likely to develop a relationship. And then there's another effect called the propinquity effect, which is that we're more likely to develop relationships with people that we're like physically near. So like you're more likely to be friends with your next door neighbor than you are to be friends with someone who lives 4 doors down, just because of that physical interaction. So we're kind of wired that way, and then we're also just sort of, as Julia found, there's all of the ingredients of emotional intimacy that you would need within a workplace. But the workplace, every psychologist I spoke to who works within a workplace, they said it is so naive if you try to stop this because it's going to happen so much. So there are surveillance, there are rules, but a lot of workplaces that are smart about it will be proactive with rules that you could work within. So like a love contract, for example, that you could sort of agree that we're not going to cross a boundary, et cetera, just to make sure that everyone's aware, like this relationship is happening, but it's kosher. But the problem, I think, with the kiss cam, I mean, we still don't know a ton of detail about what happened. If it was an affair, which is what Chris Martin implied it was, are you really going to proactively go to your employer, be like, hey, I'm cheating on my wife with this person? Like, can we sign a contract? Like,
no.
That's where I think it gets sticky.
And those boundaries, it seems like they're meant to be broken. I feel like it's sexy and salacious when someone, like a manager, hooks up with a report or a CEO dates an HR head. The more inappropriate it is, the more exciting it's going to feel. But doesn't that affect the workplace when those boundaries are crossed, when power dynamics exist within these affairs or relationships?
I think so. I mean, as Mia was saying, it seems unavoidable. And I'll say, too, with workplace relationships, this is an environment where I think what makes workplace affairs or relationships so enticing is that you are also, you're going to this place where you're dressing up every day. I think especially post-pandemic, you're showing up, you're maybe very ambitious, or you're being appreciated for your ideas. And I think it's very hard to prevent some of those connections because they can feel so potent to people. And again, especially as we talked about, maybe in different stages of life. So yeah, I don't know. I think power dynamics are tricky. And I think it depends on situation by situation, and everyone has very different opinions on this. It's difficult because, as Mia was saying, there are so many relationships that are formed in workplaces that end up really being long-term, lifelong relationships. So it's difficult. I myself don't know how to navigate that fully.
You guys wrote about a midlife awakening, that office crushes, office fairs can kind of unlock people's lives midlife. Is the office starting to become like a new Tinder for the over 40s crowd? Talk to me about this midlife awakening that you've observed or wrote about.
I was just interviewing a different happiness researcher for a different story, but he mentioned something that was interesting that, happiness-wise, people tend to fall into almost like a U shape, where around more midlife, your happiness dips a little bit. So I think that could potentially explain, again, like workplace affairs or affairs of any kind at that age. I think this is a stage in your life where, maybe the kids are grown, or maybe you feel bored in your career or a little bit stuck. And I think if you meet someone who kind of recognizes or sees you in a different light, maybe, or where you feel seen in different light. And then this is not to condone affairs or anything, but I think it's an interesting, I really liked that this therapist that we spoke to was kind of open to the idea of why people are drawn to affairs in general or workplace relationships at that stage, because it's very easy to write them off or to say, I would never do that. But as we've spoken about it, these are quite common. And I think they speak to a larger feeling that people have maybe closer towards midlife, about wanting more meaning or connection.
People are so sort of absolute in the way they think about it. I would never do that. But then when you look at the numbers, everyone does it, or at least a fraction of us does it that isn't insignificant. Let's talk about what HR should or shouldn't do. Should HR just give up and stop trying to prevent hookups in the office? Or are there things that HR should be doing to prevent this sort of stuff?
HR should not give up, but they should not try to prevent this stuff because it's just so naive. But you do want to be proactive because, if you're on a team, for example, and that like someone senior to you is hooking up with someone even more senior to you and they're kind of in control of stuff, maybe your trajectory in the workplace or your money or like what tasks you get. You might feel a bit miffed if something doesn't go your way. You might be like, hey, maybe it's because of that relationship. So as HR, even if it's not because of that relationship, you just want to make sure that no one feels that way. So I think they would, being proactive with coming up with different kinds of policies of like what we as a workplace accept. At least it shows outwardly. Also because there was a Supreme Court ruling a while ago that showed that the workplace itself, the business, can be liable for any kind of claims of like a sexual harassment claim if the relationship goes sour, or like a conflict of interest claim. If someone brings that against an employee, the workplace is maybe going to have to go to court. So then you really don't want this to happen. But there are lots of different types of templates of contracts that they could use.
Well, Mia de Graaf and Julia Pugachevsky are reporters at Business Insider. Mia, thanks for joining me. This was a fun chat.
Yeah, thanks.
And Julia, thank you as well.
Thank you.
After the break, we'll cover new research that explores whether you're funny because of your genes or because of your environment. Did you get your funny from your mom or your upbringing? We'll look at identical twins to tell you which one is true.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Taste the forbidden fruit of knowledge. The last show with David Cooper.
Is being funny something you're born with? The big question here. Or is it all about who you hang out with and what you've been through? Well, a new study in humor that looks at twins may unlock the answer to this question. We will dive into the science of humor, self-delusion, and cartoon caption contests here with Dr. Gil Greengross. He's an evolutionary psychologist at Aberystwyth University in Wales in the UK. Gil, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, David.
There's something fundamentally not funny about studying whether people are funny and making it into a science. Does this kind of research suck all the funny out of funny stuff, or do you get to have fun in your everyday interactions?
Oh, not at all. I'm actually, because I'm studying jokes and humor, I get to read a lot of jokes. I get to see funny things. So obviously it's a serious endeavor. So I'm an academic and I write papers and I do serious studies, but academic can be funny. And I actually just came back last week for a from a humor conference. And you get to hear a lot of people talking about humor research and telling a lot of jokes, seeing how ChatGPT can produce jokes, and studying stand-up comedians. So you're exposed to a lot of humor on the way to doing your research. So no complaints here.
As someone who did stand-up comedy for many years, I've thought a lot about funny. And I think a lot of people, and I actually believe this is wrong, they believe that funny is something genetic, something innate. You either have it or you don't. But I'm of the opinion that it's like something you can work on, like any craft. I wouldn't be a concert pianist if I never sat down at the piano. I wouldn't be this amazing funny person if I didn't actually work at it, write, research it, try it out, try to develop my craft. So let's get to the crux here. This belief that people are funny and they're born that way, and that's it. You're either born with the funny or not. What made you choose to explore this?
Well, we know that most psychological traits are at least partially inherited. So we know that both biology and environment contribute to who you are in most traits. And I also always thought that humor is genetic and you're born with that. But we did a study on twins and we got some surprising result that kind of maybe make me think maybe otherwise. But we'll see if the result will hold.
So let's get into it. How do you test whether being funny is innate, genetic, inherited from your parents, or it's something learned that it's based on your upbringing, based on your socialization, based on your relationships?
Right. So it is a complicated question. And in order to separate genes from environment, we use what is called the twin paradigm. So what we do, we compare identical twins that share 100% of the genes to non-identical twins that share only about 50% of the genes, just like any two siblings. So we test them on a certain trait, in this case, humor ability. And if we find that identical twins are more similar on this trait than non-identical twins, then we can assume and we can conclude that the trait at least has partial genetic basis.
So how do you test for funny? How can I go through this test to come to the conclusion that I'm not funny, which I'm sure it will be? Cartoon caption contest? Is that a good way to look at this?
Right. So you might be familiar with the New Yorker magazine cartoon caption task that have been used a lot for studies like this. So participants see a cartoon that doesn't have any caption, and they're asked to produce a funny caption to the cartoon. Now, this is a very difficult task, and actually most of the people that participate in this kind of studies fail miserably. But the funny people do produce something funny, and what we do is they write something, and then we give judges that are not aware about who the participants are, what's their age, gender, etc. So they're blind to any characteristic, and ask them to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, and then we determine who is the funnier one and who isn't, and then we compare the identical twins to non-identical twins to see what happens.
So what were the results? I gotta know.
So surprisingly, we found that identical twin and non-identical twin had practically the same results, meaning that identical twin did not score more closely to each other. So funny identical twins were not were also as funny as their identical co-twin, the same way that funny non-identical twin was had a funny co-twin. And the results basically say that it doesn't seem that humor might have a genetic basis, but I would maybe just some caveat to that, because we studied, the task is a little bit artificial and it's not like everyday use of humor, and it might not really capture how people are using humor in their daily life. And it's also might be different types of humor that stand-up comedians use on stage like you did. So we found this initial result. We were surprising. We were a little cautious about it because this was the first study that actually looked at the humor production abilities and irritability of this trait. And we will conduct subsequent studies with different sets of twins to see if the results hold. And then we'll have maybe a clearer view of the problem.
So I guess what's missing here is a look at conversational humor, how people use conversation in their day-to-day lives. Like when I'm being funny or trying to be with my friends, I'm not doing it through cartoon captions. And so there's more research needed here. But let's get speculative. I know you're a researcher. I know you might not like this, but let's see what the big takeaways might be, even if we don't have 100% confidence in them. Based on your study, could we say that being funny is not genetic, or it's likely that it's not genetic? And if it's not genetic, where does funny come from?
Well, I wouldn't say that funny is not genetic. Again, I'll be cautious. And actually, I think based on all my understanding of humor and also other cognitive traits, because we know that creativity, intelligence has a strong genetic basis. So my guess is that there is a genetic basis. We just couldn't find it because of maybe the task, and also because our sample was quite older sample, like average age of 66, and it was also skewed mostly women, 90% women. So these things can kind of skew the result. But if it does hold true, that means that the environmental factors like how you are raised, how your parents talk with you, what jokes they tell you, that's what determines sense of you, but also your peers, how you joke with your friends, how you go about at school. That's like seems to be very important in developing your humor.
So one way to get funny, if this is all true, and I know it's just initial results, is to choose a funny friend group or grow up in a funny household. Like, would that be a surefire way to become a more funny person?
Yes, that would be. I mean, we don't always determine who obviously our parents are or siblings are, and we can have more choice who our friends are. But sometimes we use humor actually to compensate of other traits of people, for example, that are maybe sometimes a bullied kid, sometimes use humor to kind of gain a little bit more leverage against others. Like Mel Brooks famously said that you don't beat the guy that make you laugh. So we use humor in different ways when we are in social groups. And I think the way that kids mainly use it can affect how humor will eventually develop and how it will manifest itself when they're older.
What's next in your funny research?
Well, I'm trying to do a replication study for this study with a different set of twins that will be hopefully better sample, also maybe with different tasks. And I'm also generally interested in studying stand-up comedians and other humor attribute as well.
Well, evolutionary psychologist Dr. Gil Greengross works at Aberystwyth University in Wales in the UK. Gil, thank you for talking to me today. I appreciate you coming on the show.
No, thanks for inviting me.
That's our Monday night show. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget The Last Show, available as a podcast for you to stream. Just head to www.lastshow.pizza. That's lastshow.pizza, not .com. There you can find out details about the podcast and how to subscribe. I'm David Cooper. We'll be back tomorrow night. And this was The Last Show. Not the first show, but The Last Show.
They come from Survivor. They come from Big Brother. They know what they're doing.
These vets wrote the playbook, and they have all had to earn their stripes. How did you win Survivor?
Manipulating people. Same thing I'm gonna do here.
And now, new threats will enter the game, hungry to forge a new legacy.
Once we train them, it's gonna be hard to contain.
This really, truly is the most even matchup that I've seen in a long time.
The Challenge, Vets and New Threats. All new Wednesday on Slice and stream on Stack TV.